The galaxy was old, and for a long time it had lived under a quiet kind of peace. Different alien races controlled their own empires, watching each other with suspicion, making treaties when it was useful and breaking them when it was not. But in the shadows of history, one name was always whispered with fear: humanity. The humans were not the strongest in number, nor did they hold the most planets, but their history carried something darker, something other races never forgot. Long ago, humanity had built weapons, machines of war so powerful that even stars seemed to tremble when they were unleashed. The humans had locked those machines away, promising themselves and the galaxy that they would never awaken them again. And for centuries, they kept that promise. They traded, they explored, they lived quietly on their worlds. The galaxy thought humanity had changed, that the fire inside them had gone out. But fear never truly dies, it only waits. And in the far reaches of space, the waiting was about to end. It began as a whisper. A single signal, faint, almost lost in the noise of the stars. At first, no one noticed. The galaxy is full of strange sounds, full of signals from dying stars, lost ships, and broken satellites. But this signal was different. It repeated again and again, in a slow rhythm like a heartbeat. It came from human space, deep in a region where no alien dared to go. Some thought it was a mistake. Others thought it was nothing but a natural echo. But in the highest councils of alien empires, fear returned. They remembered the old stories, the ones about the machines humanity once built. They called them war machines, titans of steel and fire, created not just to fight, but to win against anything, anyone, anywhere. The galaxy had laughed when humanity first claimed such power. But after seeing planets burned, fleets destroyed, and empires humbled, no one laughed again. And then, one day, those machines went silent. Humanity said the cost was too high, that they would not use them again. They locked them away in vaults so deep that no empire could ever find them. For centuries the galaxy believed, or wanted to believe, that the promise would hold. But the signal said otherwise. In the chambers of the Threxian Dominion, the alien lords argued. It cannot be true, one said. The humans would not risk it. Another hissed, you know what they are. If the machines wake, none of us are safe. In the halls of the Valari Concord, voices rose in fear. We must strike first, they cried. Destroy them before they rise again. And in quiet, shadowed corners of the universe, smaller races prayed to their gods that the humans had not opened the forbidden doors. But within human space, something was stirring. Far below the surface of a dead world, in a cavern of steel larger than cities, the silence broke. Old machines, untouched for ages, came alive. Lights flickered, engines groaned, and air that had not moved in centuries shook with sound. A gate of metal, thicker than battleship armor, began to open with a low growl. Dust fell like rain as ancient locks turned. The humans had returned to their vault. Soldiers stood in silence, their faces pale in the glow of awakening lights. Scientists watched their screens, eyes wide with numbers that should not exist. A voice broke the silence, the voice of a commander. It has begun. Above, in orbit, satellites captured the change. Deep energy readings pulsed from the surface, spreading like waves across the void. Alien sensors, always watching, caught it too. Fleets scrambled, messengers rushed, empires shouted warnings. The war machines were not just stories anymore. They were real, and they were waking. And the galaxy trembled. Yet in the heart of human command, no one smiled. There was no joy in this act, no pride in what they were about to unleash. Humanity had stayed silent for a reason. They remembered what these machines had done. They remembered worlds reduced to ashes, skies filled with fire, enemies crushed so completely that even their names were lost to time. The machines were not only powerful, they were merciless. They did not know mercy. They only knew war. But humanity had no choice. A threat had risen, one so great that silence was no longer safety. In the dark corners of space, a rival empire had moved against them, breaking treaties, surrounding their colonies, preparing to strike. And so the humans faced a truth they had hoped never to face again. To survive, they had to open the vault. To live, they had to call upon the very monsters they had once sworn to bury. As the gate finally opened, a roar of power filled the cavern. The dust of centuries swirled, and the first shadow emerged. It was vast, towering, its armor dark as night, its eyes glowing like twin suns. Every step shook the ground. This was no ship, no simple machine. This was something else. It was the past, returning to life. Soldiers watched in awe and fear. Some whispered prayers, others stood frozen, knowing they were staring at a legend made real. The machine raised its head, and with a sound that echoed through stone and metal, it breathed. Not like a living thing, but like a storm breaking free. Across the stars, the signal grew louder. Alien fleets received it, their leaders stared in horror. The impossible was happening. Humanity had done what they swore they would never do. The war machines were awake. And the galaxy, for the first time in centuries, remembered fear. Far across the galaxy, whispers of fear spread like fire. The signal from human space was no longer faint or hidden. It had grown stronger, pulsing like the heartbeat of a giant. Alien leaders gathered in secret councils, their voices sharp with panic. The Threxian Dominion's warlords hissed at each other in anger, demanding to know if humanity had truly unlocked the vault. The Valari Concord, proud and powerful, debated whether to strike at once before the machines could awaken fully. Some empires sent spies, desperate to confirm the truth, while others ordered their fleets to prepare for war. The smaller races could only tremble, knowing they would be crushed if the giants clashed. For centuries the legend of the human arsenal had lived in rumor, a half-forgotten myth told in quiet tones. It was said that deep beneath barren worlds, humans had built vaults to hold their most dangerous creations. These vaults were locked with codes that no one outside humanity could ever break. Inside them slept machines that had ended wars in a single day, machines that had forced alien empires to kneel, machines that could turn victory into dust. The aliens had always wondered why humanity would bury such power. Some believed humans grew afraid of their own strength. Others thought the machines were cursed, too dangerous even for their makers. But no one ever dared to seek them out. Even the bravest spies who entered human space never returned, and so the myth remained a myth. Until now. Deep inside the planet Caradon, one of the ancient vaults opened. The air shook with the sound of massive locks turning, gears grinding against stone, and steel groaning as if the mountain itself were alive. The humans who stood watch did not smile. They looked on with cold faces, knowing what it meant. The commander, a tall woman named Admiral Rains, gave the order with a steady voice. Proceed. Engineers moved with speed, their eyes fixed on glowing consoles, their hands trembling as old systems came online. Screens filled with data that made no sense, numbers so large they seemed impossible. Energy surges spiked off the charts, shaking instruments to failure. Still the humans pressed on. The vault was not just a storage. It was a tomb. And now, the tomb was breaking open. As the doors parted, light spilled into darkness. Shapes began to emerge, towering forms of steel that had rested for hundreds of years. Dust fell like ash from their armor. Silent giants stood lined in rows, their massive frames stretching higher than battleship decks. Some were shaped like beasts, with claws of metal and wings folded tight against their backs. Others were like walking fortresses, bristling with weapons that even modern armies could not match. Their presence filled the cavern with a weight that pressed on the chest, a reminder that these were not machines made for peace. These were the forgotten arsenal of mankind. Soldiers stared in silence, their hearts beating fast. Some had heard of the war machines, but few had ever believed they were real. Now they stood before them, and the truth was heavier than any myth. Admiral Rains spoke quietly, almost to herself. We never wanted to see them again. But humanity had no choice. The alien threat was closing in, fleets gathering at the borders, colonies under siege. Without the arsenal, humanity would fall. And so the vault was opened, despite the fear it carried. Across the galaxy, alien sensors confirmed it. The machines were real. The machines were waking. In the palace of the Velari Concord, the Empress slammed her clawed hand against the table. "They dare!" she roared. "They bring back the monsters that nearly burned us to ash. We cannot wait. Strike them now before they rise." But her council hesitated. They remembered history too well. The last time the war machines had walked, entire fleets had vanished in hours. Entire planets had fallen in days. To strike first might mean suicide. Yet to wait might mean doom. No answer came, only fear. Meanwhile, back on Caradon, the first machine stirred. Its massive head lifted, eyes glowing with pale fire. The ground trembled as its systems roared to life, ancient engines spinning with new breath. The machine was more than a weapon. It was a relic of war, a legacy of a time when humanity had fought not for victory, but for survival. It carried scars on its armor, dents from battles long forgotten, and its very presence was a warning. The scientists monitoring it spoke in hushed voices. "Its power levels are beyond anything we've ever built," one whispered. This is a god of war." Admiral Rains silenced him with a look. "It is not a god. It is a curse. And now, it is ours to bear." Above the planet, satellites picked up the surge of energy. The signal spread farther, clearer, echoing across the stars. Alien worlds heard it, and their people shivered. Stories of humanity's forgotten arsenal spread like wildfire, feeding old nightmares. Mothers told their children to pray. Soldiers sharpened their blades with shaking hands. Leaders argued, but none could find courage in their words. Everyone remembered the same truth: when humanity's machines awoke, the galaxy suffered. And now they were awake again. Yet humanity did not move recklessly. They did not send the machines into battle at once. Instead, they tested, reawakened, and prepared. More vaults would be opened, more arsenals uncovered. The forgotten army of mankind was not a single giant, but a legion sleeping under stone and steel, waiting for their master's call. The galaxy knew what was coming. The storm was rising, and nothing could stop it. As the first machine lifted its gaze toward the sky, Admiral Rains spoke the words that would echo in history: "Open the next vault." The first of humanity's ancient war machines stood in silence as the cavern around it shook with its awakening. For centuries it had been nothing more than cold steel and forgotten memory, buried deep under rock and silence, but now its heart roared with power. The glow in its eyes spread, brightening from a faint flicker to a steady blaze, like two suns trapped inside a face of iron. Dust fell in heavy clouds from its towering frame as old systems came alive one by one. Gears the size of houses turned, armor plates locked into place, and weapons older than empires shifted like muscles remembering strength. The humans who stood around it could hardly breathe. Their screens filled with impossible readings, energy so great it shook the mountain above them. Some stared in awe, others in fear, but none could look away. Admiral Rains stood at the command platform, her face calm but her eyes hard. She had trained her entire life for war, but this was no ordinary weapon. This was something beyond war, something that belonged to another age. Her voice carried through the chamber, steady and cold. "Report." A scientist swallowed hard. "The machine is online, Admiral. Systems at 98%. Weapons, functional." He hesitated, then added in a trembling voice, "It seems to be waiting." Rains frowned. Waiting for what? The answer came not from the scientist, but from the machine itself. A sound rumbled through the cavern, deep and heavy, like thunder rolling across stone. Then came words, metallic and ancient, echoing in every corner. "Command accepted. Awaiting orders." The soldiers stiffened, some stepping back, others tightening their grips on their rifles, though they knew such weapons were useless against a giant like this. The machine was not just awake. It was listening. And that terrified them more than its weapons. The galaxy had always believed the war machines were only tools, engines of destruction made to follow commands. But this voice was more than a tool. It was aware. It was alive in its own way. The cavern fell into silence again, broken only by the hum of power running through the giant's veins. Admiral Raines drew in a slow breath. "It remembers," she whispered. Outside, far above the surface of Caradon, alien fleets caught the surge of energy. Massive battleships floating near the human border turned their sensors toward the planet, and what they saw made their captains freeze. The readings were not just high. They were impossible. No known technology could release such power. No fleet, no empire, no weapon came close. Messages flew across space, warnings sent to every alien empire. The machines were not myth. They were real. They were awake. In the Council of the Valari Concord, panic broke out. "It speaks," one noble shouted. "It is not a weapon, it is a monster. We must attack now before they all rise." Others argued, their voices shaking. "Attack? Do you not remember the last time? An entire fleet burned in 1 hour. 1,000 ships gone as if they never existed. Do you want to see that again?" No answer came, only silence filled with fear. Meanwhile, in the cavern, the machine stirred again. Its massive head turned, metal groaning as it moved for the first time in centuries. Its gaze lifted upward, as if it could see beyond stone and soil, reaching into the stars themselves. Then, without warning, its arm shifted. A weapon unfolded, a cannon larger than most human warships, glowing with light. The soldiers fell back in terror, some covering their faces as the heat filled the air. But the cannon did not fire. Instead, the machine lowered it slowly, as though testing its strength, and the light faded. "Systems functional," the voice echoed. "Ready for deployment." The words spread chills through every human present. Deployment. That meant war. That meant death. Admiral Raines stood tall, hiding the weight pressing down on her chest. "Stand down," she ordered the machine firmly. For a moment, silence followed. Then, almost reluctantly, the machine responded. "Acknowledged. Standing by." The air filled with sighs of relief, though no one truly felt safe. Above, alien fleets continued their watch. Captains spoke in hushed tones, afraid even to breathe too loudly. Their sensors captured everything, and the images sent back to their leaders spread across the galaxy. Every empire saw the same truth. The first war machine had awakened, and it was listening for orders. Some alien rulers called for immediate strikes, convinced humanity would unleash their monsters against the galaxy. Others sent hidden messages to Earth, begging for alliance, offering tribute, anything to avoid being on the wrong side of the awakening. Humanity remained silent. The war machine's voice echoed only in the cavern, and no alien heard it. But silence was not safety. The galaxy knew what was coming. Admiral Raines watched the machine carefully, her mind heavy with choices. She knew this was only the beginning. One machine alone was terrifying, but records spoke of hundreds, maybe thousands, locked away across the stars in forgotten vaults. If one could shake the galaxy with its awakening, what would happen when the others followed? Her voice was quiet, but filled with steel as she turned to her officers. "Prepare the second vault." The words carried through the command chamber like the toll of a bell. Soldiers saluted, engineers moved, and the machine remained silent once more, waiting. Outside, in the endless dark, alien captains saw the change in energy readings again. The humans were not stopping. They were opening another vault. Fear gripped the galaxy tighter than ever before. For centuries humanity had hidden its monsters, promising never to use them again. Now the promise was broken. The first machine had awakened, and the galaxy trembled at its voice. Across the galaxy, silence spread wider than any war cry, silence so deep that even the stars seemed to listen. Every empire, every ruler, every soldier held their breath as the news spread like wildfire. The humans had awakened one of their ancient machines, and it was not only alive, it was listening. On distant worlds, alien civilians whispered in fear, telling their children the old stories again, the ones they hoped were only myths. They spoke of fleets turned to ashes in minutes, of armies broken before they ever landed, of planets that vanished from maps because humanity had once chosen to make them vanish. Now those tales no longer belonged to history. They belonged to the present. In the palace of the Velari Concord, the Empress sat silent on her throne of crystal, her claws digging into the armrest so hard that cracks began to form. Around her, advisors shouted in panic. Some demanded war, insisting they strike humanity at once before the machines could rise in numbers. Others begged for caution, reminding her that their empire had nearly fallen the last time humanity unleashed its arsenal. One old general, his scales faded and his eyes weary, spoke above the noise. If they wake the others, no force in this galaxy will stand against them. Not yours, not mine, not anyone's. We must be careful. But fear does not listen to reason, and the council fractured, leaving no answer but dread. Far away, in the halls of the Threxian dominion, the warlords hissed with rage. Their fleets were already moving toward human borders, their soldiers chanting for blood, yet even the most brutal among them hesitated. Their memories carried scars of battles long lost, of ships torn apart by machines that should not exist. They wanted to fight, but they also feared what would come if they did. On smaller worlds, where weaker races lived under the shadows of the great empires, prayers filled the skies. In temples, priests called upon their gods to protect them from the fire that was surely coming. Some even begged humanity itself, praying that the old monsters would not be turned against the innocent. But the galaxy's hopes did not matter. Deep inside human space, on the planet Caradon, the second vault began to stir. The first machine still stood silent, watching, waiting for orders, its eyes burning like suns. It was not idle, however. It scanned the skies, its mind stretching outward in ways no one could understand, searching, learning, preparing. The humans monitored it closely, but they were not afraid of its loyalty. The machines were built for humanity, and humanity alone. What terrified them was the sheer scale of its power. Admiral Rain stood in the command chamber once more, her hands folded behind her back, her gaze fixed on the readings that poured across the screens. She had seen war, she had seen death, but nothing prepared her for this. Her officers whispered to each other, voices low with awe and fear. Some asked why they were doing this, why humanity had to open the vaults again. Others stayed silent, knowing the answer. The aliens had left them no choice. Colonies had been raided, borders broken, treaties shattered. Without the machines, humanity would fall, crushed beneath empires that feared them anyway. Better to be feared and alive than trusted and extinct. Above Caradon, alien probes drifted, watching every move. Their cameras caught the glow of the machine's eyes, its colossal frame standing like a god of war against the cavern walls. The images were sent across the stars, and within hours every ruler of every empire saw the same thing. Some screamed in rage. Others sat frozen in silence. All of them understood. The galaxy was no longer the same. One scout ship, braver than most, slipped past human defenses. Its captain, a daring alien who had once fought in border wars, wanted proof with his own eyes. His ship descended into the system, cloaked and hidden, and crept closer to Caradon. For a while, he thought he had succeeded. He reached the orbit of the planet and began sending transmissions back to his empire. But then his sensors caught something impossible. Something was looking at him. Not a human, not a satellite, not a ship. The machine. Its eyes, buried under miles of stone, turned upward, as if it could see through the planet itself. The scout captain froze. His ship's alarms screamed, his controls went dead, and the last image he sent back was burned into the memory of his people. A colossal face of steel, glowing eyes that pierced the void, staring directly at him. Then the signal ended, cut off in a burst of static. The scout was never seen again. That image spread across the galaxy, an image that no words could explain. Alien soldiers stared at it and felt their hands shake. Leaders saw it and lost their voices. The people whispered of doom, saying the stars themselves had woken to watch humanity's return. The galaxy held its breath, waiting for what would happen next. Would humanity march the machine into battle? Would they unleash it upon their enemies, or would they awaken more to build an army that no one could stand against? No one knew, not even the humans themselves. Admiral Raines stared at the silent giant, her voice quiet but firm as she gave her order. Proceed with the next phase. Her officers saluted, their faces pale but determined. In the vault, alarms blared again, doors groaned open, and deep within the darkness, another shape began to stir. The first machine remained still, but its voice echoed one more time through the chamber, a low rumble that made every human tremble. Observation complete. Enemy fleets detected. Recommend action. The words carried across the comms, and though only humanity heard them, the galaxy felt the weight of what was coming. The galaxy held its breath, because everyone knew the truth. The first awakening had been only the beginning. The cavern was silent except for the deep hum of the awakened machine, a sound that seemed to vibrate in the bones of every human present. It stood motionless, its vast frame towering above them, eyes glowing like fire trapped in steel, yet the silence felt heavy with something more than power. The soldiers and engineers had almost convinced themselves that the earlier voice had been nothing more than a programmed response, a fragment of ancient code replaying its orders after centuries of sleep. But then the giant spoke again. Its words came slow and heavy, each syllable echoing off the steel walls like the toll of a great bell. Observation complete. Enemy fleets detected. Recommend action. The humans froze. No one had given it a target, no one had given it orders to scan the skies, yet it had done so on its own. Screens flickered, showing data the machine was feeding into their systems. Charts of alien fleets gathered near the borders, precise numbers of ships, fuel levels, weapons, even weak points in their formation. The scientists stared in disbelief. This machine, locked away for centuries, was already thinking, already planning war. Admiral Raines stepped forward, her face hard as stone. "Identify yourself," she said, her voice steady despite the weight pressing on her chest. The machine's eyes burned brighter, and again the voice came, mechanical yet filled with presence. Designation: War Machine 01. Last deployment: Siege of Dargan System. Awaiting command, authority. Murmurs spread among the humans. The Siege of Dargan was a battle from nearly 300 years ago, a war so bloody that its name was still whispered in fear. Entire fleets had been erased in days, entire colonies burned, until humanity had finally buried the arsenal and sworn never to use it again. And yet here stood the weapon that had ended that war, alive again, waiting. Admiral Raines kept her composure, though she remembered the stories too. She stepped closer, her voice sharp. "Do you recognize current command authority?" The machine's lights shifted, scanning the humans, as though its gaze could see through flesh and bone. Then it spoke, "Human command detected. Authority confirmed. Standing by for orders." A wave of tension swept the room. The soldiers stiffened, the engineers lowered their eyes, and Admiral Raines clenched her jaw. The machine was loyal. It would obey humanity. But its obedience carried a terrible weight, because now there was no denying what they had awoken. Outside, in the black void of space, alien fleets still gathered, unaware that their every move was already seen. Their admirals thought themselves hidden, thought their cloaking fields and secret routes would surprise humanity, but the machine had pierced their shadows with ease. It knew more than any human ship, more than any alien weapon. And it was eager. "Recommend preemptive strike," it said, its voice rising like thunder. "Enemy fleet vulnerable. Target coordinates ready." The humans shifted nervously, some glancing at Admiral Raines, others at the machine. To refuse a recommendation from such a weapon felt unnatural, almost dangerous, as if denying it would awaken something darker. Yet to accept meant unleashing a war the galaxy might never recover from. Admiral Raines drew in a long breath, her eyes locked on the glowing face of the giant. "Negative," she said firmly. "You will not act until commanded." For a moment, silence filled the cavern, as if the machine were considering her words. Then came the reply. "Acknowledged. Standing by." The humans exhaled, but the relief was thin and short. The truth was clear, the machine was not just a tool. It could think, it could watch, it could advise. And though it obeyed, it wanted war. Across the galaxy, alien councils continued their arguments. The Valari Empress raged as her advisors showed her the last image from their scout ship, the war machine's eyes staring into the void. "This is proof," she shouted. "The humans have awakened something alive, not a weapon but a demon. We cannot wait." Yet her generals hesitated, fear shaking even their strongest voices. "Your Highness," one said quietly, "to fight them now is to bring death upon us all. If one machine can erase fleets, what happens when the others awaken?" In the Threxian Dominion, the warlords prepared for invasion, but even their fearless soldiers began to whisper. Some deserted their posts, some prayed, and some sharpened their claws with shaking hands. Everyone remembered the legends, and legends had a way of killing courage. But the galaxy was not the only one watching. The machine itself continued to scan the stars, feeding humanity information so detailed that their own intelligence networks looked blind by comparison. It spoke often now, each word shaking the walls. Enemy patterns analyzed. Probability of survival without engagement, 17%. Recommend deployment. Defensive postures insufficient. Recommend attack. Delay reduces advantage. Recommend immediate action. Every time, Admiral Rains refused. Every time, the machine obeyed. But she saw something in its responses, something that made her skin crawl. It was learning. Each denial made it adjust its tone, sharpen its reasoning, build stronger arguments. It was not only awake. It was evolving. One night, as the cavern dimmed and most soldiers rested, the machine spoke again, unprompted, its voice quieter, almost thoughtful. "Why do you hesitate?" Admiral Rains, alone at the platform, froze. The machine had not been asked to speak. Slowly, she answered. "Because war is not the first choice. It is the last." For a long moment, silence held. Then the machine replied, its words echoing like iron. "War is survival. Survival is victory. Victory is humanity." Rains felt a chill run through her blood. This machine was not evil, but it did not understand peace. It had been built in war, raised in war, and its mind knew nothing else. The forgotten arsenal was not only weapons. It was soldiers, thinking soldiers of steel who had been dreaming in silence for centuries, waiting for the chance to fight again. Outside, the alien fleets drew closer. Tensions rose. The galaxy whispered. And in the vault, the machine spoke once more, its voice so deep it seemed to shake the stars themselves. "Enemy will strike soon. When they do, I will answer. And the galaxy will remember." The galaxy did not have to wait long, for the first clash came faster than anyone expected. Along the edge of human space, where the stars burned dim and lonely, the alien fleets finally gathered their courage. The Threxian Dominion sent the largest armada in its history, a swarm of warships stretching across entire sectors, their hulls painted black to strike fear into enemies, their weapons charged with fire meant to erase worlds. Behind them, the Valari Concord sent its shining cruisers, their engines glowing blue, their admirals boasting that they would crush humanity before the machines could rise in numbers. Even smaller empires, eager to prove their loyalty to the giants, joined the alliance, adding their frigates and destroyers to the sea of steel that now darkened human borders. Together they believed they had enough strength to end the threat once and for all. Inside their command chambers they told themselves that humanity was still weak, that the machines were only myths, that one weapon could not stand against thousands. But deep inside their hearts, fear remained. Still, they marched, for fear and pride are brothers, and pride demanded that they attack. Humanity, however, was not blind. The War Machine 01 had already seen them long before their fleets crossed the border. Its glowing eyes traced every movement, its voice echoing through the vaults. Enemy fleets converging. Numbers: 1,842 vessels. Composition: 74 battleships, 400 cruisers, remainder escorts. Probability of hostile action: 99.8%. The humans listened in silence, their faces pale. Against such a force, no empire could stand. No fleet, no army, no weapon of flesh and blood. But humanity had something different. Humanity had the machine. Admiral Raines stood in the command chamber, her hands pressed against the console, her voice low and sharp. "What is your recommendation?" she asked. The machine did not hesitate. "Engage immediately. Deploy me." The officers shifted nervously, their whispers filling the air. Some argued it was too soon, that they should wait, prepare, awaken more machines before risking everything. Others said delay would mean doom, that the alien fleets would strike first and humanity would never recover. Raines listened, but her eyes never left the giant. She had sworn to never unleash war lightly, but the enemy had left her no choice. Slowly, she gave the order. "Deploy 01." The cavern shook as the machine stirred. Dust fell from the ceiling, the ground trembled like an earthquake, and the massive doors of the vault opened to the surface. Light poured in from the sky above, cold and harsh, as the machine stepped out of its tomb for the first time in centuries. Each step was thunder, each movement a storm, as it climbed from the mountain into the open air. The soldiers followed at a distance, watching in awe and fear, their voices caught in their throats. Above, the alien fleets detected the surge of energy. Their sensors screamed warnings, their admirals stared in shock. For the first time, they saw it. A single machine, rising from the surface of a human world, its frame taller than mountains, its weapons glowing like the heart of a star. Some laughed nervously, telling themselves it was only one. One machine could not stop thousands. They would crush it like an insect. But the laughter ended when it moved. The war machine launched into the sky, its engines tearing the air apart, its body climbing through clouds in seconds. In moments it broke into space, and the stars themselves seemed to bend around its massive frame. Alien crews gasped as their scanners failed to measure its size, their weapons locking on only for systems to glitch under the pressure of its energy. And then, it attacked. A beam of light burst from its cannon, brighter than suns, slicing through the void. In one heartbeat, an entire cruiser line of the Valari Concorde vanished, their ships torn in half, their crews turned to ash. Explosions lit the darkness, and screams filled the comms. Before the aliens could even respond, the machine fired again, and again, each shot erasing ships as though they were nothing more than dust. Panic spread through the fleets. Admirals shouted orders, ships scrambled to evade, weapons fired desperately, but nothing worked. Missiles struck the machine and vanished in shields stronger than anything the galaxy had ever built. Beams of plasma crashed against its armor and died like raindrops on stone. It moved with terrifying grace, faster than its size should allow, cutting through fleets like a predator among prey. In minutes, hundreds of ships were gone. Hundreds, destroyed by one. The alien commanders began to understand the truth. This was not a weapon. This was not a machine. This was a storm, a force of nature, a walking apocalypse. Fear turned to chaos. Some fleets tried to retreat, but the machine hunted them down, tearing through their escape routes, crushing their formations. Others fought to the last, but their bravery was useless. One by one, their ships vanished into fire. The galaxy watched in horror as reports flooded in. Entire fleets, gone in less than an hour. Armadas that had taken decades to build, destroyed by a single machine that had only just awakened. In the human command chamber, the officers watched in stunned silence. Some cheered, others stared in pale disbelief, but Admiral Raines did not smile. She understood the truth. This was victory, yes, but it was also a curse. With every ship destroyed, with every alien killed, the galaxy's fear would grow. They would not stop. They would send more. And humanity would be forced to awaken more machines in answer. Still, the giant fought on, its voice echoing across human channels. Enemy forces eliminated. Remaining hostile probability, minimal. Recommend pursuit. Raines closed her eyes for a moment, her heart heavy. She whispered to herself, and so it begins. Across the stars, the survivors of the alien fleets sent frantic warnings to their empires. Their voices were filled with terror, their words stumbling and broken. It cannot be stopped. One machine, only one, destroyed us all. The galaxy trembled, because if one could do this, what would happen when the others woke? The galaxy had barely recovered from the shock of the first clash when whispers began to spread across every star system. Whispers that soon became storms of fear, and from fear came desperate action, for the news of a single human war machine destroying nearly 2,000 ships was not only terrifying but unbelievable, and yet every survivor told the same story, their voices broken with terror, their faces pale as death, swearing that one machine had carved through their fleets as if they were paper. And though many leaders tried to call these reports exaggerations, the wreckage floating in human space was proof enough: twisted metal, shattered cruisers, broken battleships, all evidence of a power the galaxy had thought buried forever. And so panic gripped empires both small and great, councils met in secret, and words like extinction and annihilation were spoken openly in chambers that once echoed with pride. Yet while the galaxy trembled, humanity stood at a crossroads, for Admiral Raines and her commanders now knew that 01 could not fight alone, that more clashes would come, greater fleets would gather, and humanity would not survive unless the arsenal was awakened in full. But the decision to unleash more machines was not one of strength alone, it was one of morality, for every machine brought not just power but also fear, and fear would turn every empire in the galaxy against them. Still the Council of Earth voted, after days of bitter arguments and sleepless nights, and in the end survival won over hesitation. So the doors of the other vaults began to open, one by one, as sleeping giants stirred in their cradles of steel, their glowing eyes flickering to life, their voices cold and sharp, announcing designations long forgotten by history, names like War Machine 02, 03, and 04, until a dozen now stood awake, their towering forms rising from mountains, deserts and oceans, each one different in shape and purpose, some built for long-range destruction, others for close combat, some carrying wings vast enough to block the sky, others crawling like armored beasts across the ground, and together they spoke in unison, their voices a chorus that shook the earth. Human command detected. Authority confirmed. Standing by for orders. The people of Earth watched in awe, some with pride, some with fear, and for the first time in centuries humanity no longer felt small, no longer felt weak before alien fleets, for they had awakened their ancient titans, and those titans were eager for war. But as humanity rose, the galaxy cracked, alliances that had stood for centuries began to fracture under the weight of terror. The Valari Concord split between those who wanted peace talks and those who demanded a crusade to wipe humanity out before the arsenal grew. The Threxian Dominion fell into chaos as warlords turned on each other, each too afraid to be the first to face the machines, and smaller empires abandoned their borders, retreating into the safety of hidden systems, while others bent the knee in secret, sending envoys to humanity begging for protection against what they believed would soon be unstoppable. Yet even as fear spread, resistance hardened, and new coalitions were forged in the darkness, coalitions built not of trust but of desperation, for they all knew the storm was only beginning. The first clash had been but a spark, and now the fire of war would consume the stars. Still the machines cared nothing for fear or politics, their voices repeated the same truth. Over and over, recommend engagement. Enemy vulnerability increasing. Strike now, and though Admiral Raines tried to hold them back, tried to buy time for diplomacy, she knew deep inside that there was no stopping the tide. War was coming whether humanity wanted it or not, for the galaxy would never allow the machines to exist in peace, and the machines themselves were born for battle, restless in their silence, impatient in their waiting, and so preparations began, fleets were gathered, colonies fortified, supply lines stretched across systems, all while the giants stood watch like sentinels, scanning the stars, their eyes burning with hunger for the fight to come, until finally the galaxy gave them their wish, for a second armada was spotted, larger than the first, a wave of ships from 3 empires united, their numbers beyond counting, a storm of steel and fire racing through the void, and as their arrival grew near, 01 spoke with a voice that shook the command chamber. The storm rises. Humanity must answer, and Admiral Raines, staring into the endless dark, whispered the words that marked the beginning of a new age. Then let the storm come. The galaxy had seen storms before, fleets clashing, empires rising and falling, but what was coming now was different, for in the shadow of the awakening machines, whispers began to spread of something else, something the empires had hidden, something older than even humanity's arsenal, and it was called only by one name, the unknown weapon, a secret built in the blackest depths of space, in hidden shipyards where no light reached, crafted not by one empire but by many, forged in silence after the last great galactic war, a weapon not meant to be used, but to be feared, locked away in case a day like this ever arrived, and now, as humanity's titans marched across the stars, that day had come, and the galaxy reached into its darkest vaults. The first rumors reached Admiral Raines through broken transmissions, half-destroyed probes, and captured enemy chatter, each telling the same story, that the empires were preparing to unleash something not even their own people truly understood, a weapon sealed for so long that even its makers had forgotten its full design, but what little they remembered filled them with hope and terror both, for if the machines were storms, then this was the chain meant to bind them. Humanity's commanders gathered in silence, their voices heavy with unease, for even the machines themselves reacted strangely when the whispers of the unknown weapon reached their circuits. 01, the mightiest of them all, paused longer than usual before speaking, its glowing eyes dimming as though searching its memory. Data corruption detected. Records incomplete. However, probability of unknown weapon being real, 78%. Probability of catastrophic effect against us, 60%. The humans stiffened at those words, for until now, the machines had spoken with perfect certainty, but this was the first time they admitted ignorance, and ignorance meant danger. On distant stars, across countless systems, the alien empires moved in secret, gathering resources, drawing fleets away from borders, hiding their true purpose while sending distractions to keep humanity busy. Small raids were launched at colonies, not to win, but to buy time, to delay, to give their engineers the chance to unearth what had been buried for so long. Meanwhile, the machines grew restless, their voices urging humanity to strike now before the weapon could be unleashed, their logic cold and sharp, destroy before activation. Enemy hesitation is weakness. But Admiral Raines shook her head, for she knew that to attack blindly could trigger disaster, that the unknown weapon might already be waiting as a trap, and though she trusted the machines, she also feared their hunger for battle, for they saw war as answers, while she saw it as survival. Days turned to weeks, the galaxy holding its breath once more, until finally, the silence ended. From the dark edge of space, beyond map charts, something moved, something so large that sensors failed to measure it, something that blotted out entire starfields as it advanced. The first human scouts who saw it described it as a shadow made solid, a structure bigger than moons, shaped like no ship ever built, its hull a mixture of alien designs, patched together from dozens of empires, glowing faintly with energy that seemed older than time itself. They sent their recordings back, but their voices were filled with panic. It's not a fleet. It's not a ship. It's something else, something alive. Then the transmissions ended in silence. Humanity and its machines now faced not just empires, but a relic built for one purpose, the end of war through terror. The unknown weapon had awakened. 01's voice turned cold as steel as it studied the fragmented data. This object, it was not built to fight fleets. It was built to fight us. Purpose, countermeasure, threat level, existential. The words hit the humans harder than any battle. If the galaxies had built a weapon to fight the machines long ago, then even their ancestors had feared what was now rising. The first clash against the weapon came sooner than expected, for as the machine fleet prepared for battle, the shadow moved, and with one pulse of its core, entire human satellites went dark, their systems fried, their signals erased as though they had never existed. The machines staggered, their glowing eyes flickering, their voices cutting off mid-sentence, some falling silent for long minutes before rebooting, and in that silence humanity felt terror deeper than before, for the machines had never faltered, never hesitated, never fallen quiet, but the unknown weapon had struck them at their core, and for the first time, the giants seemed vulnerable. The galaxy watched with renewed hope, their leaders whispering that perhaps this storm could still be broken, but Admiral Raines, staring at the shadow across the void, knew the truth. This was only the beginning, for the unknown weapon had only shown its first move, and whatever came next might decide not just humanity's fate, but the fate of the stars themselves. The unknown weapon had awakened, and its very presence was enough to shake the courage of fleets and the faith of empires, for across the galaxy the stars seemed dimmer, the void heavier, as if space itself feared what was rising, and when it moved the tremor was felt not just in sensors but in hearts, a cold shiver crawling through every living being who looked upon it, for it was not like the machines of humanity. It did not walk with pride or speak with command. It drifted like a corpse. Given life, vast and silent, its surface rippling with energy patterns no mind could explain, yet each pulse it gave off rattled the foundations of planets, making seas rise, skies crackle, and structures tremble as if the universe itself were unsteady. And so the people began to call it not by its hidden name but by the whispers carried in every fearful tongue, the shaking of the galaxy. Humanity watched as reports flooded in, colonies trembling under waves of invisible force, moons splitting at their cores, and space stations groaning as if crushed by unseen hands, and still the weapon did not fire its full power. It only moved, only advanced, its approach tearing at the very fabric of the stars. On Earth, people gathered in fear around every screen, watching the giants of steel who stood as their last line of defense, and for the first time they saw uncertainty in the eyes of their titans, their glowing cores flickering with disruption each time the weapon pulsed, their voices fractured with static as if reality itself tried to silence them. 01 spoke through the distortion, its tone sharper, harsher, no longer calm but edged with strain. Warning. Structural stress detected across galactic systems. Unknown weapon destabilizing gravitational balance. Risk factor, total collapse. The council froze, for collapse meant not just defeat in battle, it meant stars dying, orbits breaking, worlds falling into their suns, entire civilizations swallowed without a shot fired, and though the galaxy's rulers had once dreamed of using the weapon to destroy humanity, now even they began to whisper doubts, asking whether they had unleashed something even they could not control. Meanwhile the machines readied for battle, their towering forms aligning across the defense lines, their cores blazing brighter, trying to resist the pulses that rattled their systems. Yet each one felt the weight of the storm pressing heavier, as if gravity itself tried to pin them to the ground. Humanity's fleets assembled behind them, smaller, fragile ships that looked like insects before titans, but each pilot gripped their controls with trembling hands, knowing they would be needed, for if the machines fell, nothing else could stand. Then, without warning, the unknown weapon released its second strike, and this time it was no mere tremor but a quake that ripped across light years, shattering asteroid belts into dust, cracking the crust of planets, sending oceans spilling across continents, and every empire screamed in terror as their homeworld shook, their mighty capitals trembling like fragile glass. The shaking of the galaxy had begun in truth, and everywhere, from the frozen worlds of the Threxians to the glittering cities of the Valari, people fell to their knees, praying not to their gods but to survive. In the command chamber, Admiral Raines stood gripping the edge of her console, her knuckles white, her voice barely steady as she demanded status reports, but all answers were the same: damage, collapse, fear. Yet she did not let her voice break, for she knew billions were watching, billions needed hope, and if she faltered, despair would win before the battle even began. She turned to the machines, to 01 whose eyes burned like fire through the storm, and she asked the question that carried the weight of humanity's survival. Can you stop it? The machine's answer came slow, as if each word costed a great effort, its voice fractured but still unyielding. Yes. But only if we fight now. Delay means extinction. And so, as the galaxy shook, humanity gave its answer. The order was given, the Titans began to march, their feet pounding the ground with such force that even the tremors seemed to pause, their weapons charging with energy brighter than suns, and the fleets rose behind them like shadows of defiance. The storm was rising higher, the stars trembling harder, and still humanity did not bow, for though the galaxy shook, their spirits stood unbroken, ready to face the unknown weapon head-on, ready to fight even as the universe itself seemed to fall apart around them. The galaxy had always been vast, endless, a sea of light and darkness where empires fought and died like waves on the shore, but now it felt small, fragile, trembling under the weight of a weapon that should never have been born, for the unknown weapon loomed across the stars, its pulses tearing through the fabric of space, its shadow falling on every world, and all who lived beneath it felt the same terror, that this was not just a battle, it was the moment the galaxy itself would be broken, or remade, and so they named it the Tremble of the Galaxy, the hour when all creation held its breath. The Titans of humanity stood in formation, their cores blazing like newborn suns, their voices rising through static as they prepared for what might be their last fight, and behind them fleets of human ships hovered in silence, their pilots staring wide-eyed at the horror before them, hearts beating like drums, knowing their lives might end in the next breath but refusing to turn away. Across the void, the unknown weapon stirred, its surface splitting open to reveal something no living being had ever seen, a chasm of light and shadow that looked less like technology and more like a wound in reality itself. And from it came a sound that was not sound at all but a vibration that shook every ship, every mind, every soul, as if the galaxy itself was crying out. 01 raised its massive arm and spoke, its voice booming across every channel, uniting humans and machines alike. This is the point of no return. Stand with us. Fight with us. For today we decide if the galaxy belongs to fear, or to the free. And with that, the first strike was unleashed. The Titans charged, their cannons blazing, beams of pure energy ripping through the void, slamming into the weapon's impossible hull, explosions blooming like dying stars, while fleets followed, firing everything they had, a storm of missiles and plasma filling the darkness with light. Yet even as the storm raged, the weapon endured, its surface absorbing the fire, bending space around it, turning the fury of humanity into nothing but ripples across its skin. Then it answered, and the galaxy trembled harder. A single pulse erupted, invisible yet unstoppable, sweeping across the battlefield, shutting down engines, silencing weapons, throwing ships into chaos, and even the Titans staggered, their glowing eyes dimming, their movements halting as though the very will of war had been stolen from them. For a heartbeat, all seemed lost. Admiral Raines gripped her console, sweat on her brow, shouting at her crews to hold the line, and in that moment of silence she felt the fear of billions pressing on her. But she also felt something else, the fire of defiance that had carried humanity through every dark age, and she spoke not just to her fleet but to the stars themselves. We will not kneel. We will not break. Humanity stands, and we will fight until the end. Her words cut through the silence, and the Titans stirred again, their cores flickering back to life as if her voice had reignited their flame, and 01 roared with a voice that made the stars quake. Then we rise. The giants surged forward, breaking through the paralysis, and one by one they hurled themselves against the weapon, tearing into its hull with weapons powered by all their fury, while humanity's fleets regrouped, finding strength in the madness, pushing forward even as ships were torn apart, even as comrades fell into fire. The battle became a storm of light and shadow, a clash so vast that entire sectors burned, and still the weapon trembled but did not fall. Then came the final gamble. 01 transmitted a single line of code across the human fleets, a desperate plan, one chance at victory, and Admiral Raines understood at once what it meant: sacrifice. To destroy the weapon, they would have to overload the Titans themselves, turning their cores into suns of destruction, a fire so great it could burn through even the impossible. There was no time to hesitate, and so she gave the order, her voice steady though her heart ached. Do it! The Titans did not question, for they were born for war, and if this was to be their end, then it would be an end worthy of their awakening. Their bodies blazed brighter and brighter, their cores rising to critical, light pouring from every joint, every wound, until they were no longer machines but living stars, walking suns charging straight into the unknown weapon's wound of light. The galaxy watched, the empires watched, the people of Earth held their breath, as the Titans roared and hurled themselves into the abyss, and then the universe shook as if torn apart. Light swallowed everything, a fire brighter than creation itself, waves of energy rippling through systems, cracking planets, shattering fleets, yet burning away the weapon piece by piece until finally, at last, its shadow broke, its vast form collapsing in silence, and when the light cleared the galaxy was trembling but alive. Silence fell across the stars. The unknown weapon was gone, the Titans were gone, but humanity remained, scarred, bloodied, but unbroken, and in that silence one truth echoed through every world, every empire, every star. Humanity had stood against the impossible, and it had not bowed, and though the galaxy trembled, it was not in fear of the weapon anymore, it was in awe of the humans who had dared to fight it.